Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Contactless Experiences with our CEO of Centrifuge, Pete Blackshaw. I'm so excited for you all to hear from him. He is one of the most inspirational people I've ever met and is truly a human idea generator. I'm always so excited to hear everything that he has to say because he always has something to offer, and that's definitely something that I'm trying to pick up on. I think that's such a great trait to have. Before I toss it off to him, I want to thank our sponsors, P&G Ventures, Kroger, First Financial, North American Properties, Bora Ventures, Taft, and KMK. This would not be possible without them. Pete, I'm going to hand it off to you. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Excellent. Thanks so much for inviting me. And I know you just got a big dose of entrepreneurial inspiration, so I've been trying to think through a good flow for this presentation to follow up on that. But I thought I would, here's what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted you guys to kind of step in the shoes of kind of an entrepreneurial effort that I'm going through right now in the context of building the Centrifuge business. I think you'll find it highly relevant to a number of ideas that you might come up with, maybe even relative to your pitch ideas. But I wanted to open with a bit more about some of my digital and entrepreneurial inspirations. They'll probably raise your eyebrows, and hopefully in a good way. And then after I walk through the kind of the case study, open up for any suggestions to hear from you in terms of how the program's working out so far, because you know, that's my big passion. You guys are kind of the beta testers of this first program. And by the way, I've invited my good friend Pax to participate with me. I'm sure Zian is saying it's very unorthodox to present with your dog, but I figured it'd be fun. Okay, so let's show the first slide. And yeah, so here, you know, and what I'll do, yeah, so I wanted to first, if you click it one more time. I get asked a lot about how I got so passionate about innovation and digital. And it actually goes back to when I was a student at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And we had a big protest movement around university investment in companies that do business in South Africa. And at that time, apartheid was in full swing. And a lot of the campuses were starting to really elevate their concern. And where it ties to my fixation on innovation and digital is that I was a traditional student government leader. I was like the equivalent of like student body president. And when the activists took over the campus, essentially, they kind of took over our library. I think they renamed it Nelson Mandela Library. I came to appreciate in a very humble way how digitally literate they were, their ability to hack, co-opt the university network and email system. I don't even think we used the word intranet back then, but they figured out a way of sending these messages about the anti-apartheid movement to over 200 universities across the country. It was almost like blogging before blogging. And I remember I always developed this appreciation for the agility, the flexibility, the resourcefulness, a little bit of the rebelliousness. They were definitely breaking the rules. But they had succeeded in building this massive movement. And Santa Cruz was, in fact, the nerve center, the global nerve center for the student movement. But it always fueled this passion about, wow, they really knew. It was kind of social media before social media. And it's always kind of fueled this idealism on my part of what's possible. I've always felt like the internet is infinitely revealing of value, and we as entrepreneurs just need to find that. And that really powered a lot of my interests as I was going to business school and the like. The other, if you got to flip to the next slide, the other, so the other part of my background that sometimes I share, sometimes I don't share, depending on how I think people react, is that my first entrepreneurial venture was while I was at UC Santa Cruz, I designed the logo for the iconoclastic mascot, the banana slug. And I think I sold like 100,000 t-shirts. It was kind of my first branding exercise. And when I was in business school, I got a call from someone who said they wanted an unknown producer, a director wanted to use my film, my t-shirt in his film, which turned out to be Pulp Fiction. And it turned out to be John Travolta, who ended up wearing the t-shirt for about, for about a third of the movie. And of course that made the t-shirt and the logo, really popular. And I ended up building a website while I was in business school, if you flip to the next slide, and we called it Slugweb. And we kind of sold slugware, and I should have called it Amazon, but this was an early appreciation about, the web as a storefront. And this is, I'm almost embarrassed to say how long ago this was. This is like 1994 or 5, just at the advent of the internet. But again, it was that kind of that starting with that fun t-shirt business with the rebellious logo. It kind of goes viral through a Hollywood director. That triggers the need to create an online business. And then I just learned a lot, we weren't doing transactions. We were mostly advertising it, but we were taking names. And it was a really, really enlightening process in terms of, what's possible. And then I kind of parlayed that into the next, if you flip to the next slide, then I went to Procter & Gamble and kind of learned the soap marketing business. If you click it one more time, very much, was one of the first people to raise my hand and say, I want to help you figure out the future of advertising and marketing. And this is a really good insight for all of you, whether you're in high school or college, that, I think I told you last time, don't be afraid to raise, to write the memo, but don't be afraid to raise your hand at a time when everyone's scratching their head trying to figure out the future. You might just accelerate, you might just get an opportunity that normally you have to wait like 30 years. And so I was actually, because I raised my hand really aggressively, I was able to create, co-create P&G's first interactive marketing team within like about 2 years of arriving at the company, which was really extraordinary. I mean, at times I felt like an imposter, but it was that innocence that led to ideas that literally made us, interactive marketer of the year within a couple years of my taking that role. And I say that not to brag, but as much to empower you to just be very bold. There's so much we don't understand, especially in this COVID era. And as you kind of think about in the final stretch of your pitch competition, don't be conservative, think big. There are interested parties, there's investors in great ideas out there. And that's kind of why we want to nurture many of you early on in the process. Just like I got my first bug for business back when I was in high school selling avocados. If you go to the next slide, just to give you some context on why I'm so passionate about Cincinnati and am eager to nurture entrepreneurs like yourself, is that, after a few years at Procter, I had a really big idea to revolutionize consumer feedback. And I created this company called planetfeedback.com, raised quite a bit of money. I think it was like 31 million across 2 rounds. And I did it in complete innocence. I didn't know anything about starting a company, as tech company, but I had a lot of believers in the idea. And I think I built some street cred based on the work that I'd done at Procter. And I felt very passionate about locating it in Cincinnati. That's why I said, the consumer feedback of the world, we're going to be the consumer feedback capital of the world. That was kind of the vision for us. And I learned through that experience that, there are so many competitive advantages. I ended up merging with Mahendra's business. And for a while we were called Planet Feedback IntelliSeek, the ultimate, compromise, don't decide. And then ultimately we became IntelliSeek, and then we became Nielsen BuzzMetrics and sold ourselves to Nielsen. But there are so many ideas, there's so many opportunities similar to Planet Feedback that have yet to be to harness, especially in this post-outbreak world. The other thing I wanted to just tell you is that, you know, I'm a big believer. You know, I've given 2 TED Talks. My first one was really about the work-life advantage and how we parlay our personal digital experiences into what we do at work and what we do with businesses. And, you know, I have a lot of people that say, oh, dude, you went to Procter & Gamble. That's where you learned all your marketing skills. And it is true, I owe Procter a lot. But the stuff that's really given me the competitive edge in the marketplace is a lot of my personal journeys in digital. And I'll kind of give you 2 stories because I know you're all doing this in different ways. The first is shortly before my father died, you know, I did a lot of video interviews with him, and you know, maybe it was just a hunch that you know, he was passing soon, but and I just talked about everything from, you know, his experiences in World War II to other things. And one of the last things I did was I interviewed him about, you know, he was in the advertising industry, so the TV show Mad Men had just come out, so I kind of sat down and I interviewed him about the Mad Men TV show, and he really opened up, and you know, he had a good critique for everything. And I remember I kind of just innocently put it on YouTube, you know, not knowing what would happen, and I was kind of shocked at how many responses I got. Some were there from friends of my dad who discovered it through search. There are a couple cast members from the show that were doing their own focus group, and they discovered my dad's narrative, and they thanked me, and we had a bunch of exchanges. And you know, and I realized that there's this incredible power of the internet around storytelling, and it hasn't stopped. And what we're seeing now with, you know, not just Instagram, but also TikTok, you know, the form and the mode of storytelling continues. And it's really important to, you know, I mean, thank God I had dabbled in YouTube for fun before I had that important interview with my dad, because that triggered me to kind of put the story online. And then I kind of learned more about my father, who I dearly miss, through all, like, one of my big ahas around social media. You know, I've become like a top expert in social media, but it was from that personal capture my dad's story, share my dad's story, socialize it, that really kind of gave me that extra edge. The other example, if you just flip to the next slide, is, you know, I am so bullish on what we can do on the web. If you go to the next, just one more slide, please. Yeah, there you go. So this is a website I created when my twins were born. And if you have twins, that's a really big deal. And I hadn't done a lot of digital publishing, but I decided to create a blog, and this is back in 2004. And I created a blog called Dos Bebes, and I religiously, literally posted something almost every day. It's now become like this priceless treasure when I go back to look at it. But, you know, what that did is it kind of reminded me that, you know, the barriers are so low for us to do things. I mean, if you're a scrappy entrepreneur, the web is here to help you out. And, you know, I think it, you know, it cost me $10 to register the domain. I think I had to pay TypePad $8 a month just for the entire service. You know, add water and stir, design. You know, you've heard a lot in the last few months about minimally viable product, bootstrapping, you name it. You know, but the web is the ultimate platform to test that. And I'm convinced that when I went to Nestle and I kind of overhauled the whole approach to developing content and doing big partnerships, a lot of it was informed not by the rigorous Proctor training, but by the fact that I had just built the blog, and I kind of knew I knew the bullshit from agencies when they tried to overprice things. You know, it just brought me a certain power to the mix. And this is why I am so much of a believer. And I know sometimes the media is harsh on oh my gosh, teens and college kids are going crazy on TikTok and social media or WeChat. But I think those things are really, really important. You don't want to go overboard, but they are informing, they are feeding you with a competitive advantage that's super, super important. So don't ever lose that. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is that, and this program, you know, I've always been a big believer in tapping into those that are closest to the technology. And to some extent, this program is very similar to that. You know, and this is, I led 10 cohorts of not students, but relatively young managers at Nestle in a program called Digital Acceleration. We kind of recruited from across the world. You know, this is kind of a typical class. I think they look a little too cool for school there, but oh, did you flip to the next slide? Yeah, this is just so, you know, and you've heard me say this before, but I am such a fanatical believer that diversity and innovation share a symbiotic relationship, and the ability to kind of learn from different geographies is absolutely massive. And the beauty today, now that we're virtual, is that it's all one click away. So, you know, as you kind of think about your ideas, you know, tap into that. You know, areas like sustainability, there's innovation all over the place and you just got to figure out the techniques for being in touch with those various constituencies. The last thing I wanted to say before I get into the formal business side is I think it's really important, if you flip to the last slide, is just I'm a big believer in kind of writing a personal mission statement. And, you know, mine has evolved over time, but the foundations have always fundamentally been the same. And this is really important as you start to build your own personal brand, as you think about the story you're going to put on LinkedIn, as you think about the, you know, how you conduct yourself in interviews, you know, your brand essence in social media. And, you know, for me, you know, this is I think this is written 20 years ago, but, you know, I've always, you know, Pete Blackshaw is smart, passionate, and strategic consumer expert. His ear is wired to the consumer. He empowers people, you know, and I kind of list key brand attributes and, you know, a few things you should probably know. You know, I don't know if you've done Myers-Briggs, but I'm kind of classic ETNJ. I'm super entrepreneurial. It drives certain people crazy because they sometimes, you know, I'm very divergent in terms of, you know, thinking outside of the box. And, you know, if you're managing an organization, that can bring some challenges, but it's really important to know that. And then you know, you hire people like Zan to kind of balance it out. And so, but it's never too early to just kind of think about, like, what is your brand essence? I mean, you can't separate personal brand from the internet world. And if anything comes out of this summer, I hope all of you get a little bit closer to that brand identity. It's gonna, and again, as you learn new things, you may add a few bullets to the list, but generally the core essence remains. So let me pause right there. I don't know if any kind of questions came in. Now we're gonna move on to some of the more serious stuff, but any comments or reactions? I see a thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so we'll do some questions at the end. So what I wanted to do now is I wanted to just, you know, let you step into the shoes of something that I'm thinking through. And, you know, like you, I'm trying to figure out what's a business proposition that companies we work with will want to write, you know, want to kind of write a check for, or that entrepreneurs might run with, because, you know, I'm trying to unlock innovation in big companies. I'm also trying to encourage entrepreneurs like yourself to solve these issues, kind of come up with services and technology. So one big area I've been thinking about a lot, you know, as I think about the post-COVID world, is contactless experiences, which I define as, you know, you can flip the slide, Zaina. Good. Okay. touch-free, voice-activated, AI-enabled environments and for a post-outbreak world. Some of the synonyms are hands-free, touchless, zero touch, and as an entrepreneur, I kind of think about this, say, wow, that's a big opportunity area. And if you think about it from a product market fit, which I think all of us need to do from okay, do I have something or not? Consumer expectations, I think about my own household. It's just like, this whole notion of has the product been touched? And that is a source of fear and safety concern. And so how do you produce products that get over that barrier? And then you got regulatory concerns. Think about Governor DeWine yesterday. Everybody has to wear masks no matter where you are. So there's certain things where the consumer wants it, and then there's other things you just got to do it. You're required. And so, but those create opportunities, because entrepreneurs might say, oh my gosh, companies absolutely need to do it. Who's got an answer for this? So, consumer, and regulatory, expectations, a new price of entry. You could argue that there is so much money at stake if you get this wrong. And then, of course, there's a whole startup economy around this area. Now, to kind of bear with me on the next slide, it's really important, and you're more than welcome to steal from this, use it yourself. But I was trying to really think about how do you kind of frame the opportunity. So this is what I call the contactless experiences curve. And never hesitate to brand your own framework. People always appreciate that. Makes you feel like a little bit more like you're McKinsey, and but actually, if you click a couple times, I want to get the full slide. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so you go back. Thank you. So think about like a quadrant analysis where you've got two different things going on. You've got enablers, which kind of gets into like technology, and then you've got expectations, typically coming from the consumer or the customer. And it's interesting, like when the internet evolved, we all got pretty excited about just smart technology. And that was almost like the starting point. But as you kind of move up, you've got not just smart technology, but what I would refer to as blended reality, where you're seamlessly integrating. And that includes areas like voice, AR, VR, advanced gaming. But you've got a pretty steep technology curve that's starting to blur the line between offline and online. And then on the expectation side, think about, when I was leading digital at P&G, we were really excited about friction-free. Oh my gosh, if we can make things friction-free, the world's going to change. And that meant, simple to use websites, being mobile friendly. And now the criteria is no touch, minimal or no human contact with product or service, especially in the selling, delivery, or transactional stage. So you've suddenly moved the needle from, it's no, the North Star is no longer friction free, it's no touch. So if you think about if you kind of map that out on a grid, you'd say, the first X is kind of where I think we are right now. And then the one at the northeast corner is where we need to be like yesterday. And for you as entrepreneurs, that's a pretty big gap to fill. There's a lot of new opportunities that you can tap into to meet that needs. But very, if I talk to my friend Brian Cobb, who runs innovation for the Cincinnati airport, he will say that number one priority is contactless experiences. There's no way they're going to be able to build trust with consumers who go hop on planes if there isn't confidence that if I order my fast food, that a bunch of hands haven't been put on it. And then same thing with like delivery and, moving luggage and just the whole mix. So how do you innovate in that area. And that's an area where we're putting more and more attention. And if you flip to the next slide, there's some really good inspirations out there. We won't have time to get into it, and you're certainly welcome to offer your own comments. But, you know, I think Amazon Prime is doing a very good job. I think Kroger has set an extraordinarily high bar. A lot of the airports in Asia are, you know, 3 steps ahead, no touch, really good use of QR codes. I think the financial industry is doing a lot of interesting stuff here, have been for a while, but obviously it's stepped up. But even beauty care companies, I think this is L'Oreal, which has developed kind of a no-touch product sampling. So you don't have the physical beauty product. You're not going into the store where someone puts the lipstick on you. You kind of do it through virtual means. And then you've got really, I wouldn't say dumbed down, but just simple things like, contactless, open up the door, simple ideas. You could probably print it out on a QR code. But I think what I want you to think about, massive levels of innovation, and will continue so. This is going to be a gravy train of opportunity. And, even those of you that are in high school, there's no question a lot of your, your administrators and your teachers, they're kind of sweating it out right now. They're not really sure, will it open, will it not? Are the parents going to freak out or not? Will the older teachers want to come back or not? Because they're more susceptible. And then the question is, like, what are the solutions? Like, what could you bring to the table that might bring greater confidence, higher trust? You could be the hero. And again, this is a very dynamic space right now. So so one way I've approached it, if you flip to the next slide, and this is a living, breathing case study, because I'm not suggesting that I figured this out by any means, but we are in the process of developing a product that I have a hypothesis will be very attractive to companies. And it's kind of like 2 parts to it. Number one, I'm going to create a tool that, like the tool that I created with Mahendra, kind of that was a social media analytics firm. We're going to create a readiness audit where we're going to determine where you stand on that curve. So you can find out, am I ahead? Am I behind? How far behind? And of course, once you and then how do I calibrate versus others? And then that, sorry about that. Someone rang the phone and I just got rid of them. So we'll have a readiness audit, and then we will have a service with big, bold ideas on what you can do. So you can't just analyze things without action. And so I have a hypothesis that I can make money on both sides. I think I can, Centrifuge can bring a frame to figure out what's the gap analysis, but we can also bring the hacking, the workshops, the inspiration. So that's kind of the thinking. And then, so I'll say a little bit more about what this looks like. So if you flip to the next slide, and by the way, I won't be offended if any of you say, Pete, you're crazy. There's no way this would work. That's what I would expect from you. But I think from a measurements perspective, there's a few things that I think brands should really understand. Number one, I think the starting point for contactless is just voice, like our voice readiness. And we know Alexa's been around, we know Google Assistant's been around, but now it's more important than ever, because the nice thing about voice is I can just say, hey, Google, put the product in my shopper basket. And so, item to your cart. Just ask me to order something you need. Sorry about that. Those ears are on all the time. But just our brands ready for, hey, Google, shut up. Hearing loss. Hey, Google. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So one is just hearing, is your brand in a, literally, but I'm a good listener. I'm about to put a hammer on that thing. Hearing, and then like seeing, and that is, think about the store shelf where you can't touch the product. Think about the new rules of shopping at Kroger where it's linear. You can't go both ways. And so if you can't see the product, how do you know what's behind the product? And that's where suddenly augmented reality becomes really important. Then there's a dimension of feeling, which is like, how do you reassure the consumer about safety? You know, Zan and I have debates every day about how do we reassure people walking into Union Hall that we've got our act together, that our world is not only contactless, but safe. And then the act is how you act upon it. And so just to kind of roll this up into like what it looks like is, if you go to the next slide, this is something, and Nikhil, who's on the line, is kind of helping me develop this. So if you ever become my intern, I will immediately put you into the product development department. But we've made really good progress where this is where you might take a number of products, and in this case, it's Colgate versus Tom's, where we would take very common queries and we would just, you know, ask the device basic questions about where it's made, is it green, you know, put it into my shopper basket and kind of see where it lands, you know. And if you're really good, you get a 5. If you're bad, you get a 1, and use that as a diagnostic to put in front of a brand marketer and say, dude, you got a long way to go. And what's interesting about this, and I'm not sure if Nikhil can jump in or not, whether he's got the permission, but what we've found so far, and we've already been doing this for a number of brands, is that in most cases, like very rarely does a query through voice land on the brand website. It typically goes to Wikipedia or an activist site, which means that brands have a lot of exposure. Nikhil, are you there? Can you jump in on this?
Yeah, I was about to hop in and say most companies, especially the larger companies, haven't really focused on this new aspect of advertising through voice and making sure their brand actually pops up when people are asking questions either directly about their brand or within the products that they develop. So for example, as you can see on the screen, it says for Colgate, their answer from Google was a 1 when you asked about the product. And most likely means that you were either brought to a third-party site or a site that either gave little to no information about their product. And the trend that Pete has been talking about everything going contactless, and a big part of that being voice, if you can't if you can't give the best answer to your customers, they're really going to be deterred from buying your product. Whereas Tom's on the other side, a much smaller brand that I definitely hadn't heard about before I was doing this, they have a lot of 5s on their answers because they have spent the time advertising that way and looking to build their strength within the voice community or technology.
Yeah, this is a really good, it's almost a counterintuitive insight, but it's something that gave us massive headaches at Nestle because, you know, we were the big bad, company with, $150 billion market cap, but these small, nimble, ankle biter companies started by people like you were just dancing circles around us. They were grabbing market share and we were like, what the hell is going on? And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about don't be ashamed to say you really understand TikTok, because these new channels are the secret sauce to influencing algorithms of the future. You know, a lot of these companies where the voice, Google's not discovering their website is because they have a false sense of security that the website that they finalized 5 years ago is good enough. And the reality is that you have to produce content in different ways to cater to these new devices. And I say this in part because this is where I think all of you have a massive competitive advantage. You are in touch, we are not. Even at P&G, I would always say the air is thinner on the 11th floor. And so, there's a lot of value where you can kind of swoop in and help these companies. And again, Tom's, for whatever reason, a lot of the questions, even at the category on Tom's, not on Crest, not on Colgate. And those are really important questions, like why, and is there a unique value proposition I could create? If you go to the next slide, this is kind of this, we haven't realized this yet, but the vision would be, okay, we'll take these great insights and we'll turn it into a really good user-friendly report with snackable charts. I'm a big believer that you have to make data really interesting to inspire action. And again, I think bloggers do a brilliant job of this. Again, TikTokers as well, because they've only got, what, 30 seconds to do the goofy dance and to tell their story. So how do you kind of take the great insights and translate it into action? And then kind of building on that, the other thing I've been thinking about is if you kind of jump to the next slide, actually go to the competitive advantage. Next one. You know, the other thing I've been thinking about is, are there ways of delivering the data in a way that really forces them to pay attention? One of the things I learned at Nestle was, as the head of digital, I was always putting out content, but I put people to sleep all the time. And I kind of learned over time that I had to be as snackable as Instagram to get people to look at content. And so I'm starting to experiment with, Nikhil and I are going to experiment with almost like a weather report, where I'll do a little video and it'll be like telling the weather report, clouds of negativity are coming. And it'll never be more than 2 minutes. But the point is that, making it really user-friendly to get the concept across. And you might realize that when you complete your thesis in college, that 3-minute video summary is really, really important to ensure that you get full credit for the thinking and that your ideas are kind of taken to the next level. The other thing I did, and this is important, and this does not cost a lot of money, but I'm a very competitive person. And when I decide I want to do contactless experience, no one is going to outcompete with Centrifuge. So I just grabbed a lot of market share. So if you look at those domains, I just bought them all. I think they cost me $10 each. So, I kind of created a moat around my business. So handsfreeinnovation.com, sorry, I own it. Touchless branding, sorry, I own it. Zero touch branding, essentially all roads lead to Centrifuge. And that's how, and again, this is not a break the bank. This is just thinking ahead of, how to really kind of win in the marketplace. And of course, winning with search is everything, right? Because that's how you acquire leads and the like. Okay, let's flip to the next one. And yeah, just an example of, I call this, I'm guilty of inventing a lot of terms, but I call this experiential analytics. So I'm kind of trying to pull them into the experience of explaining how the data works. And again, if you're in a large organization, the last thing you want to do is send your boss something that's really boring, impenetrably bureaucratic. You want to give them something that's really easy to understand. So I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we achieve that? So again, and then the other thing that we're thinking about is just, if you flip to the next slide, you've heard from Elisa before, but Centrifuge is getting really good at using game mechanics. So I'm going to try to figure out how we gamify the diagnostic. So we're probably, even before I open my mouth, I'm probably going to give them a bit of a quiz. We're going to game it. Nikhil and I are going to come up with a top 10. Did you know? If you search, what's the best toothpaste? Where do you think it's going to go? And I'm sure they're going to think it goes to Crest, but it really is going to go to Tom's. And then we'll score them, and then we'll use that as a way of further engaging them. But again, different ways of pulling the customer into the product. And then the last part of this little business strategy I put together is just, where else could I make money? Okay, if I'm going to be the leader in contactless experience, like, can I make money in other places? So if you go to the last slide, Zaina, so these are just hypotheses, but this type of thinking is really important as you try to impress investors or even get employees to join your team. They got to know, is the boss going to have a way to pay the salary? But, dedicated conferences, you can make a lot of money doing conferences. And, we'll probably do another. I did a webinar on contactless experience. I was blown away at how many people signed up. We'll probably do one where people have to write a check to get in, because we really know our stuff and it's worth it. We might do paid workshops. I've been thinking about creating an idea bank where we just come up with great ideas, maybe brand them a little bit. And if a company wants to come up with touch-free laundry, they just write us a check and we kind of give it to them. But again, different ways of thinking about the opportunity. But I think the key takeaway for all of you here is that the post-outbreak era is rich with entrepreneurial opportunity. The marketplace is struggling for clarity, solutions, opportunities. You bring a very innocent, you've almost been uncorrupted by method, or uncorrupted by too much training, and, think really, really big. Think about product market fit, be very creative in how you think about revenue potential. I may conclude that only one of these is how we should position it for making money, but I think investors always appreciate the thinking. But again, it's a great opportunity. It's a great time to be an entrepreneur. We created this program to make sure that all of you are aware of the fact that Cincinnati wants to be a winner in building an innovation economy. We know that many of you may, like Nikhil, live in New York, for many years, but we want you to know that when you're ready to do a startup, there is no better place on planet Earth than Cincinnati to get started. There's no better place on planet Earth to get, mentorship from people like Mahendra or all the folks that you've heard of. There's no place where it's going to be easier to get your first pilot with a big customer. So with that, I'll kind of pause, and I know we got a few minutes. I'd love to hear any comments at the presentation or any feedback on the program whatsoever, because we want to keep making it better. What do you got for me, Zaina?
If you look in the chat, there is one comment.
Okay. Can you read it to me?
Yeah. What's funny is that Colgate owns Tom's now, shows how large companies don't idea share well. Just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, oftentimes, the smart large companies will not mess with the small companies. In fact, when Unilever bought Ben and Jerry's, I think they almost like firewalled the technology systems, and it was pretty much hands off. They're doing it right. Don't mess them. At Nestle, we treated Nespresso like a startup, and their product. It was almost like almost get like fired if you talk to the people at Nespresso, because people in the main Nestle were worried that we would poison them, that we would mess up the way they think, and so it's always a doubt. I think in theory there are scale advantages of bringing these companies on board, but you don't want to mess up what's special. And there's absolutely no question. As I'm sure Nikhil noticed, that the way those websites are built for Colgate versus Tom's are different. They're just different. And I think oftentimes for the big company, the question is, do you make everything else like this, like the new website, or do you dumb down everything to the big corporate model? Any builds on that, Nikhil?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, especially for the startup companies, usually their leadership is a lot younger and a lot more centralized within the social media technology space. And so inherently their websites are a bit more user friendly, whereas big companies like Colgate and other huge companies owned by large consumer product goods, good companies like P&G, they kind of have a very cluttered, not the most user-friendly website, and they definitely should take a page out of the smaller startup companies' books and try to transform their websites because of their success. And what smaller companies do a really good job of is capturing a certain piece of the market share and making those people very loyal to them. And usually if you establish that loyalty early on, it's going to be hard to sway them either way, to a different company. And I think that's something that's really important in every company.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for that, Nikhil. I see a question or a comment from Patrick Wells. Presentation is amazing. Thank you very much. Humble. What are the key characteristics we should borrow or keep in mind for our pitch competitions? Listen, no one beats Mike Halloran from a training for the pitch, so don't let anything I say move you in a different direction. The only thing that I would add, and bring your best game and your highest order of passion to the pitch. And I know I sound biased because I probably, I'm a little bit over the top on passion, but I will tell you, I raised a lot of money without a lot of detail. I think I nurtured a lot of trust that I would figure it out, and that I would surround myself with the people that would figure it out with me. But what I know for a fact closed the deal really fast was the passion and the conviction that I brought to the table. What I love about Mahendra, Mahendra can be a very polarizing figure, as are a lot of entrepreneurs. But what I absolutely love about him is that his passion to get it done and his passion for problem solving. And if you can convince your investors, the judging panel, that you will figure it out because you're so passionate about it, because your personal brand is inseparable from the success of that business, they're going to pick you. They're going to look kindly upon you. And even if you don't win the pitch competition, they may hit you up afterwards and say, we got to help you in some way. So, my biggest advice is don't hold back on the passion. There's no stigma there. People aren't going to say you're irrational. It's really, really hard to make a business work. It's not a rational process. It's not just about pay. It's that inner drive. It's that that kind of keeps you going. So they need to know that you're all in, and that even if the first product you articulate doesn't play out according to plan, that you will pivot and get it right. And entrepreneurs like that see a lot of success in pitch competitions and get a lot of money. I hope that's helpful. What else? Any other kind of questions or any kind of feedback in general on the program so far? I know we've thrown a lot of content your way. We have recorded it, and I do think sometimes the second time's the charm. I was telling Zaina and Zan, we probably could do a better job giving you jargon guides on various things. Especially for those of you in high school where, there's probably a lot of, terminology that just doesn't show up in, high school English or language courses. But any other kind of feedback or areas you want to kind of probe? Nikhil, is there anything else I said that you want to correct in front of your peers?
I definitely wouldn't correct anything. I would echo what you were saying about the pitch competition for sure, though. It's most important to get your story down. And if you really believe in your idea, I know Mahendra was talking about this. If you really firmly believe in what you're talking about, good things will happen.
And take full advantage of the resources that are out there. They're there. And, and I would, I would respectfully ask that all of you make a concerted effort to be ambassadors of what we're doing. When we sent the initial pitch letters out, we had a couple people say, "Oh my gosh, the summer started. I didn't look at my email." So we need to build a lot of awareness. We got twice as many of you as we expected, but we think we're onto something really big, and your input can help us make it great and make it national. And I don't know if Zaina mentioned this, but I testified before Congress last week for about an hour and a half. I kind of gave an initial pitch, and then I got grilled by this bipartisan committee. And it was all about, how we think about solutions for the post-COVID era, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs and small business people. And, there is so much of an interest in new solutions. It just kind of solidified in my mind that, I gave an example of this program is like, hey, we're testing a new model for nurturing entrepreneurs early on, but the curricula that we're using could be applied to small business players. So, your feedback is really important because, it could help us to develop an even bigger program. Tomorrow I have a big meeting with Facebook. I sent an email to my friend Sheryl Sandberg, who was a classmate at business school, and I told her I was testifying before Congress, and I said, I'm trying to find out big solutions for how to help businesses and entrepreneurs. And now they're really interested in helping out. They probably need some positive publicity, but, I'm kind of talking like, why couldn't we create, the world's greatest on-demand training program on Facebook, which has 3 billion people, and it encompasses Instagram, it encompasses WhatsApp. Surely there's a big idea there. But I'm only saying that to you because there's just a lot of great opportunities that we can tackle. And the more you give us feedback on what worked, what didn't, what can be improved, like a good startup, we'll iterate, we'll adapt, we'll make it even better in the future. So as the members of the inaugural class, you are disproportionately more important to the process.
Okay, Pete, we only have about 2 minutes left. So kind of going off of feedback, since this is a meeting format, the survey won't pop up when you leave the meeting like how it has for the rest of the webinars. So I will send it in the chat and in an email. You'll get an email about these recordings and the links to watch them again. I think those are all my notes. With like the last minute we have left, Pete, I was wondering if you could leave us with like a quick little note or like something to take away as like college and high school students. What can we do to make sure we're informed and always forward looking, and kind of like develop that attitude of like, oh, like what can I do next to make things better? Just stay really externally focused, and push outside of your comfort zone. I think platforms like Twitter are fantastic because it's just, some of it's chaos, some of it's noise, but there is so much brilliant thinking, and it links to deeper content. But just, your external radar is the compass of your future, and, avoid parochialism. But the good news is I do think your generation is several steps ahead of the future than even when I was growing up. So, and then definitely keep in touch, manage your network. Your network is everything. And that is a big part of your brand identity, and consider me part of your network. If you need a connection with anyone out there for a job, internship, there might be someone on my LinkedIn list, or, if we can help in any way. We want you to be wildly successful. We want you to be hungry entrepreneurs. Again, even if we have to wait 5 years. But again, thank you so much for participating. Keep spreading the word.